Okie dokie. I found a little trick here. Hopefully it's going to work. I put the screw in, and the screw offers just enough resistance to hold that in place. So let's see if that's going to work for us. Blind magazine. So actually, it's not even, we don't need to play with that right now. So let's just put this in. Now the back pillar is doing its thing. I gotta hone out that hole, because this is that bothers me, that's snug like that. Sorry, I'm so close to the camera. It's just the way it works out here. Okay. That one's threading in good. We don't want to get it snug until we get the front one doing the same thing. Okay, the front one is not grabbing. So that means we're a little bit out of alignment. So I may have to relieve a little bit in that pillar. As the back one's in, and okay, well, maybe we'll just have to loosen this front one up a little bit to get the back one loosened, rather, to get the front one to take. I think it's right there. It just won't quite grab. So let's adjust that. Maybe the front one first, because it's real close. I can tell it's right there. It just won't quite grab. So I think what we're going to find is that, yeah, I'm just a little bit off with positioning. Probably we can do this here too to hold this. Because right now it'll do nothing but help us. And we don't over tighten that screw, because all it does is hold the back of the trigger guard. All right. So that relief there is just for the back of that trigger right there. And this here, oh, here's why. Our pillar turned. Our pillar turned. Okay. Our pillar turned, and now it will not make it tall enough to work. So let's just file on that a little bit. I got some small files. Let's just file on that a little bit and relieve the inside of that pillar. I'll do that off camera. Hope I'm not zoomed in too much here. Hold on. Okay. Dry fit went good, but I did have some issues. When I drilled the front one, I must have been off just ever so slightly, because I couldn't get it to line up. It would just start to grab. It was off like a few thousandths. So what I had to do was, and this happens at time to time, and it's not, don't freak out if it happens to you. You didn't ruin anything. Ideally, you know, you want this to be perfect. You want to drop your pillars in, bang, bang. You know, it wouldn't fall through. But you want to put your screws in, tighten them up, and everything line up. That's perfect. And that's ideal. But it doesn't always work that way. But don't freak out, because remember, you're gluing this in, okay? So what I had to do was I had to go in with the Dremel tool and just, you see my red mark there? I just had to touch that side just a little bit. Now it's better that you do it on the wood than on your pillars, because you don't want your pillars, you don't want these holes in the pillars to be hogged out. You can touch them with a file, you know, a nice small file. And, you know, if you get some grooves in there with the threading because things are off, you can just touch that and you'll be okay. But ideally, you want to do everything to your wood, to your stock, because once you glue these in, okay, once you put that in there and you put the glue on it, it's going to set, because you're going to put it together and screw it together and then let the glue set. So it's going to glue in the exact position it needs to be. The fact that this moves around, remember we drilled it big for room for epoxy? I just made a little more room for epoxy. So this whole pillar is going to shift like that, up and left, because that's how I drilled the hole off a little bit. So the whole pillar, when it's done, when I take this back apart, it's going to look like that. You're going to see a gap on this lower right side. It's going to be a gap with all epoxy in it. And it's not going to mean anything. It's not going to hurt anything, because the hole is there and it's going to be lined up and it's going to be perfect. So this is the kind of thing that happens, and I'm kind of glad it happened, because it's a good learning tool. Also, when I put this in, this is plastic, and it's a failure point. You can buy metal ones, and I probably should have. I didn't think about it. And the same thing over here on the other side of this is plastic. So this is going to compress. It's not going to be dead solid. Ideally, when your action screws tighten down, you're going to want them to bottom out and then turn like just to load those threads. And you're going to get a little bit of sponge, just a little bit, because you're compressing this tiny sliver of plastic here and this tiny sliver of plastic here. And it's all for looks. So I don't think it's going to hurt anything. That's the way they build the rifles. That's the way they are. So it's going to be fine. But ideally, it's not perfect. Now, one other thing, when you put this together, we glue this up, I'm going to spray release agent, which is going to be case lube. Any case lube. This is one that just happens to be on my bench. Hornady one stick, one shot. Works great for release agent. Spray it all over, let it dry. It leaves a waxy coating, and the epoxy will not stick. So we don't want the epoxy to stick to our action. We want it to stick to the wood. We want it to stick to the pillar. We don't want it to stick to the action. We don't want it to stick to our trigger guard. We don't want it to stick to our screws. So we're going to spray all our screws. We're going to spray everything that we don't want the epoxy to stick to. Okay. Now, while I'm in here, I think I'm going to do a little bit extra. And I'm going to put a little bit of epoxy in here, because I got a lot of extra room where this goes. I'll show you here real quick. And we got the box that's going to limit it. I pulled the scope off just so I had a little extra room, but see here? Now that's going to be eliminated with the action screws, but it's got a little bit of flex, a little bit of movement. So we're going to be able to fill that with epoxy and get rid of that. Also, when you get this in here, make a mark or a mental note where everything is up here, and wrap some tape around here. What that's going to do is it's going to keep the barrel centered in the stock, because right now it's free floated. You want it free floated. But when you put it together and you epoxy it, you want to make sure it stays even and straight. So a couple of wraps of tape around here will increase the diameter, will make it a wedge fit, and will keep it centered in the front of the stock, because we're going to tighten these screws up and let this epoxy dry. And in a day, we're going to pull it apart. So we don't want to have this glued together so that it's, it's bang, it's pushing really hard on one side, crooked like that. That's an exaggeration, but you understand what I mean. That tape will keep it straight and square in the stock. All right, so that's, I'm just going to do a little more cleaning up here. Clean off this really good, and then I'm going to spray it. I'm going to roughen up in here for the bedding to stick, because I want the bedding to stick all in here. I'm just going to rough it up with a Dremel, and then we'll come back. Okay, a little bit of a mess, but this was JB Weld. It's the higher strength JB Weld. Not that it really matters. It's just epoxy glue, gluing the pillars in. But you want to wipe off anything that comes out. And you can see I got a little bit of shine on there. That's the release agent. And I coated everything. See the release agent everywhere, the shine. Running down the sides. It's all release agent. That's all fine. There's the tape to keep it centered in the barrel channel. And it is in there. You want to make sure everything works. You don't want to have any surprises. So now it's just a waiting game. Set it aside and come back in about 24 hours and see what you got. So I'll see you in 24 hours. All right, here we go. Not quite 24 hours later, but we're about maybe 16 hours. Let's see what we've got here. I'm really, you're forever anxious when you do these kind of things because, you know, you just glued your action to your stock. No matter what your brain tells you, with the release agent and everything, it's always a concern that you're going to permanently mount your action to your barrel. So let's see what we get here. Okay, that's good. You already saw me do the safety. So let's turn this over and let's check these screws. So this one here is just a wood screw. It just holds the plastic trigger guard in place. And here we have the action screws. So let's see here. Oh, good, it turned. All right, it's a little, all right, there's some epoxy in the threads, but not bad. All right, that one turned too. Okay, that's half the battle right there. The screws turn out, they're not locked in. That's half the battle. So there's one. There's two. And I think I just discovered why. That's tight. I didn't grind that round. And I think it's... Throw it on the ground, Bri. Don't you love it? I hate when that happens. Oh, does that get me? Causes me more work because I got to bend over and it hurts my knee. Well, that's the price I pay, right? Okay. So there's a little bit of epoxy in these threads, which is why I've got to thread that one all the way out. Well, let's see what we get here. Okay. Now, will the action come out of the stock? What I like to do is kind of just wrap on the barrel and the action up here. All right, it's loose. All right, here we go. We didn't make it permanent. All right, there's our action. Moment of truth. All right, trigger guard came out. There's a little bit of epoxy in there, but that's why we sprayed it with release agent, because what it does is it just makes for a nice bed. A nice bed for this to fit into. And sometimes you got to do a little bit of trimming with a razor knife to make sure there's no edges or nothing that's gonna see it bled back in here. It came back in here, but doesn't affect anything because there's plenty of room. We're gonna have to trim a little bit. Well, I guess it goes in. Okay, so that looks okay there. So let's look at this side. All right. Not bad. Not bad at all. See, I spread it all around here so we had a nice bedded surface, and I spread it all around here. Now obviously we had a tighter fit back here because you can see there's only epoxy here. It's here, but it's very thin. So we made more contact with the wood stock here than we did up here. So it was touching on the pillars. You can see the shiny spots. That's where these pillars, or this pillar, was touching the underside of the steel. But we got that bedded nice, and we've got a good front shoulder here. I put extra in there, but it doesn't matter. I'll rough that up, and you see the marks that I made up here. I'll rough this all up and rough all this all up, and then lay a skim coat in here when I finish bedding this out. So now we're bedded really nice. That's pretty nice. That's form fit to the action there and there. So we've got a good solid base. So overall I'm pretty pleased with that. Okay. And there we go. So we started out just doing pillars, and we ended up doing a little bit of bedding at the same time. And there we go. So the next step is probably going to be, we'll let this harden up for some days. It takes a good 24 hours for it to get stable. I'll do some trimming in here. Make sure that it's nice. And then maybe we'll do some loads next. I've been talking to MCK Mark, and he's got some loads worked up with stay-ball powder, and I think I want to duplicate some of his loads that have been working so good for him and in his 243 Ruger American, and we'll see if they don't work good in this Savage as they do for him. All right, so there we go. There is the entire job. All I got left to do is clean off all this bedding. I mean, all this release agent, and we'll be done. All right. I'm pretty happy with that. Everything looks really good. No problems at all. All right, there it is. I hope you liked it. I hope you found it educational. Let me know if you've ever done it. Something you'd like to do, something you'll be adding to your next build, because I think it's going to benefit you quite a bit. Alrighty, that's it. God bless everybody. See you later.